Okay, so I've got the recording started. We're recording just the screen share and our video and voices. The chat is not being recorded. Maybe you want to start with quick intros before we jump into the questions.
Sounds fantastic. Katie,
all right, so bear with me. It's my first time doing this, but welcome everyone to our office hours. My name is Katie Gaborsic. I am an Adobe Analytics Champion, and I have a great slew of people with me today. So Sarah, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Yeah, I'm Sarah Owen, and I've been doing Adobe Analytics for quite a while, like back when it was still called Amateur. So absolutely love it. And so yeah, currently I work at Search Discovery with Jason, so that's awesome. I got my teammate here with me, and yeah, I will kick it on over to my teammate Jason.
Kind of like you said, been like ditto almost honestly. like I've been doing this for almost 20 years, and back to Omniture and this on the client side, on the consulting side for the last almost 15 years. I've been here at Search Discovery for 9 going on 10 years now. I've helped write certifications for Adobe Analytics practitioner, developer, and other things like that as well.
Check you out.
Right. I have not been doing analytics as long as these two. I've been in analytics for about 4 years. It's my first year in the Champions program. And I'm currently a digital analyst level 3 at Best Buy Canada, because I am Canadian.
Better.
Gotta rep Canada. You're repping the Kansas City. I gotta rep the Canada.
Exactly. Well, awesome. Cool.
So I think we just go ahead and kick it off from the top to bottom, right, Sarah and team?
Sounds perfect. So I'll start talking, jump in whenever, especially if there's something in the chat. But yeah, like Mandy said, it is getting recorded, and so this is where maybe Katie, you could drop that into the chat, like if you can get into the workspace, you can workspace.
I did drop the link in the chat already. It is the first message in the chat.
You're already on it. Sweet. So that's where the recording will be. Awesome. And we did have some questions that were pre-submitted. So, why use PowerPoint when you got Workspace that has text available? So one of the first questions was, what SEO capabilities does Adobe Analytics have? And so to capture, when you think about SEO, some of the factors that play into like your rankings are like your page speed. And so you can have a plugin that says get page load time plugin, so that you can talk about how fast your pages are loading, because that is, I know it's kind of a black box what all goes into your rankings, but usually page speed is one of those. And then like Katie and Mandy, if you want to, there's quite a few links we'll share here, so if you want to just keep kind of dumping them into the chat, that would be awesome. So here's an article about the Get Page Load Time plugin, how to use it, and how to set it up. Other things with SEO, you can definitely look at your conversion. So when you're using your marketing channels, you can see how your organic traffic converts. So whether you're doing email captures or maybe a purchase or reading a blog, so watching a video, so whatever one of your like maybe key metrics is that you're trying to have people do on your site, you can see how does your organic traffic, how is it converting to that. And so to set up marketing channels, so that would be part of it. I'm going to plug myself here. So this, I'm also part of the Adobe Analytics user group for NOM Central with two of my good friends, Luke and Gretchen. And so we did put on an event a couple months ago talking about how to set up marketing channels. So that link that will get dropped in will walk you through how to set up marketing channels. Another way to look at your SEO is like, how does it convert to direct? Because probably you want SEO, you want people out there finding you and clicking on organic results, but then eventually you're like, hey, I don't want you going out to Google anymore and potentially finding someone else. I want to just like get you to directly come back to my site. So like, how are you converting organic, your SEO traffic, into direct traffic? And with that, you can do, once again, your marketing channels have those set up, and you could do a cross tab. And this YouTube video, Jen Lasser from Adobe does a really great job of explaining this cross tab table. And what you can do is, as you'll see in this video from Jen, you can set it up two different ways. Like you can have, you'll put your first touch up here and your last touch down here. And what you can see is what's their first touch. So here's natural search. And then what has been their last touch. And so you see like here, almost 43% of people whose first touch or whose visits were first coming through natural search, so SEO, 43%, that's also their last touch. So almost half, a little less than half is staying with the same channel. But then you can see where else it's going. So for natural search, like almost 22% now are coming in on other campaigns. 9% are coming in on print. So you can see how when they first came in on SEO, how are they continuing to come back to your site? And I know this is fakey data, so it's zero here in direct, but you would probably want to see hopefully more people just directly coming back because they're like, oh, this was great. I don't have to Google search it anymore. I can just go straight back to this website because I know and love them. And Jen will talk about two ways to look at it. Here, we're looking at just the percentages. So we've kind of, let's see if I can open this here. We've taken off number and just have looked at percent. So you can kind of see your percentage a little bit cleaner. Then you always do want to look at your hard numbers to say, okay, well, what were the numbers behind it? So here in this case, instead of saying we just turned off percentage and turned on numbers. So two ways to look at the same thing, one with your raw numbers, one with your percentages to see how people are migrating from your organic or SEO into hopefully direct. Another way still kind of is think about the content. So it's been many years since search terms have been, sent from Bing or from Google or you name it. So as soon as searches turn secure, which was many moons ago, the keywords are no longer getting sent over. So to kind of understand like maybe what people are searching on and kind of, you always have your search console, but you can also look at the content. Like, so you can see what content is organic traffic coming in as their entry. So where are people entering your website? Because that could kind of give you an idea of that is organic. So from organic traffic, what's their entry points? That can maybe give you a little bit of insight as well. Now in the secure searches, yep, stop, kind of like I said, stop many years ago. So sadly, you won't get a keyword, but maybe just kind of backing into like, oh, if they came to this page, what does this page kind of rank well on? So those are kind of some ways I think that you can use Adobe Analytics data to understand your SEO or your like natural organic search traffic.
Awesome. Thank you, Sarah. We do have a couple questions from the chat, and thanks to Mandy for helping me out with my technical difficulties. The first question is from Maria. Is there a way to change the summary row in freeform tables to be average of bounce rate instead of sum?
I think this is probably related to one of the questions that we got ahead of time. I think we have a panel down below about the different options for the freeform tables.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Awesome. We can jump down to there. Anything about the SEO or like anything like that, or were the questions non this? I just want to make sure if anybody had a question on this, we could nail it and then go on.
No, I think just those two, and they're not related. So I think we can push it forward.
So let's see. So for
I don't know. I'm not seeing you scroll, Sarah. I don't know if I'm the only one having this issue.
I do see you scroll.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm sorry, she's in a
Good.
meeting at the moment.
Awesome. Yeah. So let's see. There was one about grand totals, maybe about.
Yeah. So probably I think this would sort of be, somewhat related to that. So
And then,
change
yeah,
the
say the question one
summary
more time
row.
so I can write it down.
Yeah, to be an average instead of a sum.
Awesome.
So
Yeah, so here,
go ahead.
no, you're good. So here we got some more documentation. This one was specifically some documentation around totals. So we have Adobe documentation here on workspace totals. And within this workspace total, you'll hear them talk about manual and dynamic rows. So those two kind of go hand in hand. And so we can talk about this and then we can jump into average and sum. And so here, kind of on grand totals, I think what people are looking at is when you just run a report, like pulling marketing channels, God bless it, apparently my favorite thing, page views, visits, and online orders, you see like 98,000, so these two numbers look the same, out of. But then when you filter, like here, I just filtered on campaigns, you see like the 50,000, so kind of like your total out of is shown here. So I'm thinking this is what they're talking about when they're talking about grand totals, because when we, uncheck that, then stuff goes away. So it just tells you like the total. So the total for these two off your filter is 59.39. But then if we add back in our grand total, it shows like out of how much. So that's kind of the difference here with these big, the bolded numbers versus the out of number below it. And then with segments, you don't even get the out of, like there's no, it's just kind of summing your segments together, which is that tip that in analytics, 1 + 1 is not always 2. So depending on your metric, like adding them together is safe, like page views, a page view is a page view, but potentially like something like a visit, you usually don't want to sum visits together. So whenever I kind of show something with segments where I'm like, oh, don't be showing my totals because, potentially you could, these segments, there might not be much of an overlap, but sometimes the segments, I could fall into both segments within a visit. And so then if they were added, it would dupe it up. So usually anything for like visits, I'll be like, don't show a total because we know that total would be what's up here, like kind of over giving yourself.
And the same thing too can happen with the dimensions if you bring them in by like just dropping specific items. So if instead of bringing in the full dimension, you bring in specific items from it, or even if you like that table on the left that we have, if you were to select a few rows and then hit display selected rows, that will change the grand total and it'll sort of remove the deduplication. So if we were to filter for those two, the grand total might be less than 11,000 visits if they had both in the same visit. But here now, the way that it is, it's going to count duplicates for visit and orders and page views from the dimension. So that's one thing to also be wary of when you're looking at your grand total. So like if you were to maybe, Sarah, can you select all the rows and hit display selected rows?
Well, maybe I can, I'm just going to hit them all. Top to bottom is not working. There you go.
Yeah, so instead of 16,000 now, because it's bringing them all in individually, it's 27,000 visits instead of previously 16,000. So that's one thing to watch for with your grand totals is getting that duplication in there.
Awesome. I think I turned this up. Awesome. Cool. And then, so average and sum. So I know there's some cool stuff with calculated metrics, so we can go in here, kind of poke around. Sorry, I don't have any off the top of my head. Well, we can find, I'm sure Jason or Katie can find some links to documentation, so that way, because I would love documentation. But you can, within calculated metrics, there are tons of things you can do in here, like with your functions. And so with functions, you can do not only if statements, but guessing you can do like the cumulative average. I think I've used cumulative before, so now we have more of a cumulative average.
I think it's
There's
mean.
different.
If you search mean. Yeah.
That's so funny. Well, I don't think you're very mean, but
Yeah.
So I think, and we can search, because I know like here I'm not giving you very good definitions other than when you go into calculated metrics, you do have, and you hit add, there's not only can you add functions, you can make static numbers. So I think whether you're doing averages and sums like that, I think function, and we can probably Google Adobe Analytics calculated metric functions to get like the description of, because there are just some crazy ones. Like I know I like math, but like these just get, there's a lot allowed. So a lot going on. Like here, row sum, row min, t-scores, for all the A/B testers out there. So I have used row count before, so that's a really good one to say like how many, like if you're doing a workspace for a test and you want to say, hey, how long has my test been running? You can do a row count to see how many days, it's been going on, or weeks, however you want to do that. So that's a pretty sweet one too, to get a fun number to say how long has something been happening. But yeah, tons of good stuff. So I'm guessing like this is what could help out with that average and sum. Awesome.
And then the next one, and it's already in the workspace as well, is just talking about low traffic. So I think it's like the fourth one down. We are seeing low traffic for some of the pages.
Yeah, low traffic bucketing is unfortunately sometimes unavoidable when you're looking at certain dimensions in workspace. So if you have a dimension that has a large amount of unique value, so if you've got like an e-commerce website, for example, and you've got all your category landing pages and all of your product pages, chances are eventually you'll, hit more than 500,000 pages, and that's where it'll start to low traffic bucket. If you've got a dimension like your URL, every URL that has, a query string parameter on it tends to comes in as its own item in the dimension as well. So sort of not really a way to get around it, but when trying to avoid low traffic bucketing as much as possible, you want to use dimensions that have sort of fewer unique items. So when we're looking at individual pages, we won't use URL because one page could have, 5 or 10 different URLs based on the query string parameters at the end of it. Whereas something like page name is less likely to low traffic bucket.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's a link there that depending on, how many unique values you have, Adobe applies different rules to how it buckets those values. And in Workspace, there isn't a way to unbucket them. But if you've got data warehouse or you're using data feeds, then you can sort of get around it that way because it's only in the actual Workspace interface.
Yeah. Yeah, like I said, the data's still there, just, the UI. And I think one thing that, like you talked about, Mandy, is the URL, like capturing the whole URL is something that we all do in an EVAR. But then I think you can also, another thing that I've seen done is just like the path name. So, because sometimes it is nice to be able to break down something by the URL and not always you need the whole entire thing. Because like to your point, that's where you're probably going to run into unique succeeded or low traffic. But if you just capture like the path name, then you don't even have the URL parameters on it. So that could help still give you an URL to break stuff down by, but not potentially run into the low traffic. And there is the note here, like when you go to this Experience League page about low traffic, they'll say, hey, you can reach out to Adobe to increase it. And I have actually seen one company do this, and they actually continue to still have low traffic and like still show up. So I think you can definitely try it out. I don't know if it's going to be like a silver bullet to solve it. Like, oh, I won't have that happen anymore. It could definitely still happen. But I do like what you said, Mandy. Like, think of other ways that you can bucket it so you can see the different granularities. Awesome. Did that hopefully answer the
I think that was
question.
great. So just real quick while I pull this one up, if you want to go back and look at looking at what do you recommend to test analytics tracking on the mobile app, you want to touch base on that one. Yeah.
Yeah, we actually have one of the guys here that's done something about, had an event on it. So Adobe does have this tool called Assurance. It was formerly called Project Griffin, so you might hear Project Griffin called that too, but it's specifically used
Hey,
to be able to
Sarah, I
QA the
think
mobile app.
I'm just now realizing your screen is not changing. It's still like a calculated metric functions or something like that.
It's
At least for
there.
me.
It took a while for me too. I think it's just
Yeah,
the
it's changed
the
for
trade.
me.
So
Yeah, well, that's
yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Nope.
I can stop and reshare
You're
if you
good.
want, but okay, cool. Awesome. Sorry.
I might drop back out and back in then.
Okay. So there's a link to it here to get some information about how to QA it. And then if you want something a little bit more entertaining though, Jeff, he's on the call with us. He is in charge of the NAM Central or NAM East. So the NAM East Adobe Analytics European, Jen, had an event a couple months ago where Jeff Chasen from Adobe actually walked through how to use Project Griffin for testing mobile apps. And this is the recording of their session. So that way you can read it. You can be super entertained with Jeff and Jen and Jeff. And there is also a Slack channel for it. Once again, the Slack channel will probably be called Project Griffin versus Assurance. But this is the link to sign up to be part of that Slack group. So yes, there is a way to QA mobile apps, and it's Project Griffin, aka Assurance. And yeah, some really great references here to help out.
Sarah, I added that little note there on Charles, just in reference to the question. You can use Charles for Android. It's just very problematic sometimes. There's a couple of things you have to watch out for. You specifically have to ask the developers to put like a piece of debug code in the initialization of the SDK, or it just won't work in general. That's number one. And hopefully you're good after that. And hopefully item number 2 there never happens, which is something called SSL pinning, which I can't even really personally explain what SSL pinning is very well. But it's just certificate issues that stop the server calls from being visible in Charles. And I don't know I can't recall what it is exactly offhand, but there's a rewrite that you can put into Charles that sets SSL pinning to true, I believe, that if that's the issue, can fix it and resolve it. So it is possible to see it in Charles. It's just a little more problematic and challenging with Android specifically. So.
And I see Jen, Duggan, and Jeff Bloomer are both here, so hopefully they're blowing up the chat because I know that they're big fans of it, and yeah, they're the ones that posted this event that's recorded about how to walk through it and use it. Awesome.
Awesome. We have another question that I don't believe is in the workspace about what is your recommendation on bot traffic management? I know I can create segments to filter these out based on user, agent, marketing channel, etc., but analytics is not the tool to remove these bots.
I can speak to that a little bit because I've been helping a client with that specific thing recently. So identifying bot traffic is one thing, but removing it is a completely other topic. Adobe Analytics and Analytics Specialists can, there is the IAB list. You can add specific user agents as you identify them that, you perceive at least to be bots for one reason or another. The thing that none of these tools really do well is identify behavioral patterns in people's traffic to determine if they're truly a bot or not. If you go down that route, and there are some services and capabilities where people have created algorithms. We work with someone for example, that has created such an algorithm that classifies, sessions as, definitely a bot, maybe a bot, sometimes a bot, definitely human, maybe human, and it's just all these different categories, and it reprocesses over time. And furthermore, the challenge there too is that it's looking at their behavior over time and throughout a session to determine based on an algorithm whether or not they're a bot. So you probably have more bots than you think anyway, but that still doesn't address the issue. And frankly, I don't have a great solution yet as to how to, how do you stop them or kill those bots so that you just don't get the traffic in Adobe Analytics in general or even on your site. And some, that is challenging. I don't have a great answer for the stopping part. There are options to help better identify it, but it'd be great if you didn't have to pay for those server calls for sure. But I'm not aware of yet any great way to share that list and in real time in an efficient and timely manner that's not going to slow down the performance of your site, right, to these people that you do know are bots. That's the challenge, is how do you do it in a real-time fashion to stop this traffic? And I'm not sure. I mean, the larger the site you are, the more bots there are, the more difficult that becomes. I don't have a great solution for the stopping part, unfortunately.
Yeah. The stopping part is really hard. I know for, the last couple companies I've worked at, we basically just use segments and virtual report suites to filter out the traffic from our reporting. One of the things that sort of we've done is we used calculated metrics to sort of create like a bot score. And I'm not going to give away all of our logic, but I'll just give one example. So we've got multiple criteria. And say for example, if one of our criteria is, you see X number of pages per visit. If they meet the condition, they get a score of 1. If not, they get a score of 0. And we do that for all the different conditions that we have, and then create a calculated metric with an overall score summing all of those up. So it's basically one big metric with a bunch of if conditions in it and then summing it all at the end. And then we can break that down by, IP address or whatever else and, get a relatively accurate view of what's a bot. So, using calculated metrics can be a good way to sort of help identify bots and, add them to your segment in your VRS to exclude them. But stopping them from the website, that's, whole other issue.
Yeah, if anyone can figure it out, they're going to be rich.
Yeah.
In an efficient manner. I mean, really. I mean, it's a known issue, and there's not just a plug and play solution for it.
Yeah, and it's hard too because I heard a while back of one type of like program that was trying to do that, and it was basing it on, I think it was like mouse clicks and whatnot, but then you have to take into account people that use, screen readers or other accessibility devices that, you don't want to block them from getting to your website as well. So there's a lot of issues to consider with stuff like that.
There is an Adobe Analytics plugin. I think it's called bot detection essentially, but it sets a value of either not a bot or a bot basically, and all it is just detecting mouse movement is what it does, and you can segment on that. But you have to then further make sure you don't exclude mobile traffic if that's going into your report suite, for example. So
yeah.
I have to jump, but before I do, the next question looks like it's going to be, what are the best practices of using classification in Adobe Analytics?
Awesome.
Thanks for joining us, Katie.
Thanks, guys. Sorry.
Thanks, Katie.
Awesome. Yeah, I think classifications are fantastic. You can just they're kind of like your BOGO. Because one way I like to use it is when you have like related pieces of data. Instead of, you have two things, like kind of like a parent and an item. So like you can put them together into one EVAR instead of like using two EVARs, like one to hold the primary thing and one to hold like a secondary item, especially if they're related. I love to put them together into one, and then you can use classifications to pull them apart. So even though you're just using one EVAR, at the end of the day, you actually are using 3, but you get 2 for free. So it's kind of like your BOGO or Trigo or something along those lines. And so I think I see it a lot with maybe if you're capturing the day, the time, the weekend in, in a plugin. I see that on a lot of websites where when the hit occurred, you can put that all into one EVAR, type delimit it, and then use your classifications to pull them apart. So that's one of them. I just think one of my most favorite things, because I feel like I'm getting so much out of one variable. And then you can just, use your classification rule builder to very easily write some regex to pull it apart. Another one that I love to put it on is your product variable. So, you have your product identifier, which, is not human readable, but then you can upload so much great information about it. What, you name it. Product people are going crazy right now. Listen to all the different things ways that they can slice and dice their product by, or they want to be able to report on it by, like, the manufacturer, like, is it a plush? Is it a puzzle? Is it a book? Like, so all those great things can be added afterwards to be tied to that product SKU. And that's something that you can even automate. So you can work with, like, your IT team to say, hey, whenever a new product is added to, like, the catalog, then pick up, like, these 7 pieces of information, and you can set it up so it's your IT team can say, okay, here's my SKU, here are the 7 pieces of information, and they can just automatically put it where Adobe will pick it up and automatically pick it up from the FTP server, and you can, as soon as it's out there, Adobe will pick it up, and within, like, depending on the number of classifications you have, within at least 24 hours, your classifications will be available. So it's a really slick way.
And it's great for reclassifying data too. So if you've got products and, maybe once a year or so, your organization does like a reclassification of some products into different categories, having this automated upload will make sure that, your workspace gets updated with the correct classifications as well. Product classifications have been essential. I work in e-com, so, it's I use product classifications literally every day. We've got, like
awesome.
a dozen different fields that we use, and yeah, having them auto update is essential for us basically.
When I've done it in the past, because, classifications do take, like, 12 to 24 hours to populate. And so if you have, like, a new release, like, a new iPhone going out the gate or something like that everybody's going to be chomping on the bit to buy, and then all your stakeholders are going to be like, give me the reporting as soon as possible. And, you need those different types of classification of, like, what was the color of the iPhone, what's the size, all that good jazz. You can actually ask your IT team when they're uploading the data to do it off the dev. So usually, they'll upload their product data to, like, a non-production, so you have it in the dev report suite, everybody's checking out, make sure everything's looking good, and then they'll push all that information to their production catalog. Well, if you base your automation, your classification automation off the dev, so the dev database will probably have it a week maybe beforehand, so it'll be before the launch, and so that way the data can get populated into Adobe, so by the time the sales start hitting the production report suite, you will have already had your classification uploaded, so you're not having the 12 to 24 hours will happen prior to the actual sales happening. So that's something that we did before in the past, is that we pulled the data from the dev database, because the product information is not going to be that different every single time. So usually what they load is what's good. So that's kind of a pro tip of how to get your classifications available without telling your stakeholders, oh, you got to wait 24 hours to see that level of reporting. Awesome. And then I do ask, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, you go ahead, keep going.
The other one I absolutely love to put it on is marketing channels. And so you can put classifications on marketing channels, which just seems like, icing on top of icing. And we did do a NOM Central event that talked about how to put the classifications on your marketing channels. And this is the link to that recording. But just like Mandy was saying, like, when you put classifications on your marketing channels, because marketing channels, when you read about them, they're not retroactive. Like, once traffic is deemed, organic or paid search or something, that is what it is. There's no going back and changing it. But inner classifications, which makes everything, to Mandy's point, to be able to be reclassified or kind of redone, we do have a redo or do-over. You can use your classifications of those marketing channels to reclassify stuff in a different variable. So your marketing channel is set, but when you apply the classifications, that's where you can do some manipulation to kind of recast information. So that's a pretty cool way to use classifications too.
Yeah.
Mandy, what did you have?
No, I was going to say I've been using a lot of classifications lately. So a few things that I've come to realize is when possible, use rules instead of the classification importer. Because when you're adding in new data, if you've used the classification importer, then it's only going to classify the values that you specify. So if you, have a list of products and you download that list and you classify them with the importer, but then, new products get added, unless you add them to that list, they're not going to be classified. Whereas the rules, anytime new values get added, it classifies them automatically based on those rules that you've set up. And I was coming across this recently because there was one variable that we have that we're not able to use the rules just because of the way that it's set up. And so we do have to classify the individual values. And I was looking at it, I'm like, oh, what if I just do, all the numbers, even if they don't exist? Well, if you use the importer to classify a value that doesn't actually exist in your data set, it counts as a server call. So it can actually use your server call usage to classify stuff that doesn't exist in your data set. Which was something that I just learned recently, actually. So that's a good thing to keep in mind when you're using the importer, is make sure you're only classifying what's in there, or otherwise be aware that it will count against your server call usage.
Interesting. Huh.
Yeah, I found that in the documentation because I was reading through and I came across, I was like, oh, okay, better be careful when I classify.
Oh, too fun. Oh my goodness, that's crazy.
Yeah.
Awesome.
All right. Anything else on classifications before we move on to the next one? Jeff did post the link in the chat. There's a cool classification post from Experience League that he shared the link with.
Oh, yay. Awesome. Thanks, Jeff. Sweet. We'll just go to the next one then.
All right.
So next one, with the high internal traffic score, I think this is probably talking about your marketing channels. Potentially, so saying that 50% compared to other channels, and just kind of trying to understand, like, maybe why is that happening? And so if you are looking at your marketing channel rules, I think one of the first things I'd look at is, like, what's the order of the marketing channels? So the order of the processing rules for marketing channels, it doesn't go through all of them. So as soon as with your marketing channel processing rules, as soon as one of the rules matches your traffic, then it's like it stops and says, all right, this is what we're classifying you as, which is a little bit different than like your general or generic processing rules, because with those, every single processing rule can act on your data. Like if you have 7 processing rules and your data matches all 7 of them, or that, the conditions allow it, all 7 of them can mess with your data. But with marketing channel processing rules, as soon as you match, then you're done. So if you matched rule number 1 and you had 10 rules, you'd never go through the other 9 for that piece of data. So maybe seeing where, like, internal traffic should be toward the very bottom, like next to last rule should say, hey, if it's internal traffic, like if you don't match paid search or natural search or doesn't have any campaign variable, then it'd be toward that it's the first page of the visit. So you want to make sure you have first page of the visit checked, and it matches your internal URL filter, and it should be like the second to last rule in your marketing channel. So it should be that low. And if it is that low, you're like, yep, I have all that in place. Then the second thing I'd look at just is to see, is there a connection between maybe like your mobile app and the website? And I say that example in particular because if moving from a mobile app to your website, potentially you could be starting a new visit, because on your mobile app, you have one Marketing Cloud ID or Experience Cloud ID, ECID value. And if you just hop over, like maybe there's a link in your mobile app that takes you to the actual website, then you could be starting a new visit and look like a new visitor, because when you come over to your website on your phone, if you don't pass the ECID on that link, so there is a way to tie it to say, hey, don't start this visit. Like, this is still Jason. So Jason was on my mobile app, and now Jason is hopping out into my website. Like, you can pass the ECID, so you do keep that as one visitor and one visit. But if that's not there, then Jason will go from Jason to Jennifer, and Jennifer will, and so it will look like a new visit and a new visitor. So, and it will look like it's internal potentially. So I think watching how like new visitors are being valued, or that could be a got you on the internal traffic score as well. Yeah. So I think that, yeah. The person who had that question is on the call. Maybe you can type some more into the chat. Yeah, internal traffic. Yeah, only on the first hit. Otherwise, because the marketing channels they will look at like all the traffic coming in every single time. So if you don't have that first page of the visit, then it'll be like, oh, we'll start marking all your traffic as internal. But yeah.
Hey, Mandy, do you mind if we skip to the XDM Web SDK question real quick? I just want to make sure I have enough time to actually address it. I think it's like 3 down. Like, I know we sort of already talked about the grand total one, I think. Anyway.
Yeah, we already did that. So yeah.
I just want to make sure I have enough time to discuss it.
Yeah, so here you go. I can drop these, or Mandy, I think you've already been dropping links and stuff. So talking about the new XDM schema. Yeah, so there's been some cool stuff. Mandy can drop those links in, and Jason, you want me to
Yeah, sure. So, well, actually, so before you stop, I just want to read it.
Okay.
So, let's see. What are the best practices for mapping a data layer to the new Web SDK schema for analytics? You can go ahead and stop sharing if you want to now.
Awesome.
So what I was going to show and kind of discuss, or I guess what I'm just going to say is hard, easier, and the easiest. So there's kind of 3 different ways that you can go about this. I'm just going to call it out and say the hard way is the way that's in the documentation, frankly. So let me, oh goodness, window.
Yeah, there's lots of options to share.
I know. Okay. I'm assuming you should see Adobe Launch. Oh yeah, I can see my screen over there. Okay, so you can see it, right? Oh, yeah.
We got your launch screen. Right? Yep.
Okay, so let's say you have a data layer on your site and it's just simply called digital data. Just an object on the page. Yes, it can be a little more complex if you get into event-driven data layers, which you should have, by the way. But there are kind of 3 ways to handle it to get that data in there. If you're moving from, I guess what really is called legacy now, technically, to Web SDK, of which I don't think many people have adopted Web SDK yet, frankly. Probably for the reason I'm going to show you here. So the documentation will show you this approach, and this is you're going to have a data element for essentially every single event. We're going to look at purchase here. So I have, and this is called an XDM data element. And this is what this is going to look like. So this is the schema. I'm not going to go through the whole process of how to set up the schema and all that stuff. That's a whole other long talk with platform. So this is the purchase, right? This is what the schema looks like. And I'm going to open up just a piece of this, the commerce component of the schema. I'm going to open up order, and you have purchase ID. I have a data element. I don't know why that's set to card ID. Don't worry about it. But it could be card.purchase ID. But essentially, you have a second data element that is your purchase ID, just like you're used to. So this is technically referencing something like digital data.cart.order ID in this case. Right? Actually, I guess it is called order ID. I guess I just read that wrong. I think my brain saw that as card ID, but so it is order ID. So you're going to have a data element like this for every single use case, which is weird. So you're going to have all of your normal data elements that you create for, purchase ID, products, currency, tax, etc. And you're going to have to then come in here and set up this XDM object data element and set all of these different things and map them all to different XDM endpoints, right? Then you have to go into a rule. And let's look at the purchase rule. This is the purchase rule. All this is doing, it's just firing on page top here and it's looking for a specific page, nothing complex. And it's as simple as this. And I say as simple as this, but this is the specific object that you're passing along. The challenge here is that you have to create this, all these data elements. You've already went through the process of creating, the order ID data element. Now you have to create a data element for a data element to get it in there, right? That's option one. And this is really time consuming and it's probably not the direction I would go. The other option that you can do is you can take, so here we have a data element called, this is option number 2, easier. You have an option, you have a data element and it's, all this is doing is just straight up consuming the entire data layer, just digital data, and dumping the entire data layer into a single data element. And I have a rule here. This is just to be simple. This is all pages. That is, doesn't look too different, right? This type can be pretty much anything you want to, really. And I'm dumping the entire data element that contains the full data layer into this other data component of the same event that you're sending to platform. So you're just sending the whole thing. I didn't create data elements for page name or site section or any of that stuff. You're just dumping the whole thing in there. Then all you have to do is go to...
Mandy, is the screen changing for you, or is it just me?
Yeah, it's changing for me.
All right. See, Jason, now we're equal.
Yeah, that's weird. I can see my screen share and it looks like it stopped, but I'm going to keep going. So just drop out, drop back in. That's what I had to do.
Okay, cool. Thanks,
or anyone else. I'm going to go to data streams. You have to configure a data stream for anything that you do with platform and launch. You're going to have a data stream for anything that's involving the Web SDK. I wish I would have kept this open. It's this one, I believe. Okay, so I have a data stream. That property is sending to this data stream, and that's configured in the extensions. And you set up a service that you want to send the data to, and this is a part of the data stream. So here it's going to Adobe Analytics, and I'm going to hit edit. And you can see in here, sorry. Not that. I'm going to go to edit mapping. And over here, you can see I've just said, I want data, which is technically digital data, but it's that object that I sent that to through that event and launch. That object does contain page.pageinfo.pagename. And over here in this setting, I'm just going to say, I want to send that to prop 3. Right, and I want to send it to web.webpagedetails.name. These are all the XDM endpoints for all of these things. So, if I want to set product title into evar2, you're actually sending it to this horribly long product list items in an array _experience.analytics.custom dimensions.evars.evar2. That's a lot more difficult to remember than, you can do it here, and there's a nice little place where you just browse to it and pick the point. But the challenge here and the real paradigm shift is this requires you to know where this is for evar2. Like you're going to have to learn in the schemas where to find, where I said it was _experience, right? Yeah, the custom dimensions are analytics, custom dimensions, evars, and have fun scrolling down this thing when you want to map it to evar 111 or whatever. So this is option number 2. It's still better in my opinion because on the front end you're just dumping everything into that one object. You don't have to create multiple, so many data elements. Right? This is, in my opinion, a little easier and it makes a little more sense probably for most people. I'm not saying one's best or not. I'm just saying this one's, in my opinion, easier. Option number 3, which I think is the easiest, and I'm trying not to toot our own horn here, I suppose, basically. Okay. So there is an extension. Yes, it just happens that Search Discovery, who I work for, created it. That you can install. You just install it with the other, you don't have to have this data layer manager technically, but you just add the Experience Platform Web SDK, which you already have to have, the core extension, which you already have to have. And what this does, we're going to go into this and you'll see. It looks exactly what you're used to from an Adobe Analytics standpoint. EVARs, props, events. You can add custom code in here that's JavaScript, for example. And we're going to go in here and we're going to, you can create just your normal JavaScript data elements that you're used to already that pull from the data layer for page name, for example. And the great thing about this is that, so this is page loaded. So this is a page view. And I'm going to go, this extension will set things that you're very much used to. You're going to have actions like set variables, send beacon, clear vars. It's everything you're used to with Adobe Analytics. So if I go in here to set variables, I'm sending this data layer item of generic origin in this case. It could be page name or whatever. And it's just a normal JavaScript data element. The great thing is this is using for argument's sake, this is using a data element, that you already have in your implementation that was JavaScript based. It's not XDM. It's not any of that kind of stuff. And it's sending it to EVAR2. And then you've got the send beacon, which, as you're used to, sends an S.T or TL call, right? So what this extension is actually doing on the back end is it is saying, okay, well, this person wants to send it to EVAR2, but in reality, in the data stream that you're going to set up, it knows that EVAR2 is _experience.analytics.dimension custom dimensions.evars.evar2. It's doing all that mapping in the back end so that you don't have the cognitive load of having to remember to do to either do all of this stuff, this mapping, or so that you don't have to do all of this mapping here. This extension is sending this directly to that endpoint without having to do all of that other mapping stuff. So it takes everything that you know. And the benefit of this is you can also take this extension, add it into your existing launch property, go into your rules that you already have firing that have set variables and send beacons. You could add add the extension and add these same things. And now you're going to have two server calls going out. One that would be the legacy method, one that would be the new web SDK method, spin it into a new report suite, monitor it for a couple of weeks and make sure that everything is one-to-one. And then all you have to do is come in here and just remove the old actions from legacy implementation and you're now on web SDK, basically. But like I said, the great thing about it is that it puts all of this into terms which most of us are already familiar with and it's not having to learn about XDM schema endpoints. Not that you shouldn't, but it makes it definitely a lot easier. So those are the three methods that I would recommend. I would do the latter if it were me. So, or the second. So I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing. I know we have 5 minutes left. Sorry. Sorry, that was fast, but it's a lot to take in a short amount of time to move to web SDK. So.
Well, fortunately, it's recorded, so
it's all good.
people can watch it over if they need to.
Exactly. Awesome. No, this has been fantastic. No, I think the time's been used great. And I think we got almost everything, maybe just a couple of questions, but I think those can carry over to next month, right? Because you guys are,
I think we
Mandy,
got
you and Jason are awesome.
time for one more. Do you want to go over the hit visit visitor one? That one's a fairly quick explanation one.
Make me try
Want
to
to
share
share
it.
screen again?
Let's see. Awesome.
And while you're loading that, we did get one other question that we didn't put in the dashboard. Somebody had asked if there is a group like this for Adobe Target. To the best of our knowledge, there currently isn't one for Target. But if you have a Target question, especially if it's related to the A4T panel, feel free to submit it. no guarantees we can answer a target related question, but some of us have used Target as well, so we can always give it a try.
Awesome. Sweet. Yes. So for the hit visits and visitors, all right. So we have kind of a, here's the documentation. Let me drop it really fast. There you go. And so a kind of a visual way to do it is here's no segment. We're just going to pull in pages, page views, visits, and unique visitors. And so when you make your segments, you can make them hit-based, visit-based, or visitor-based. And so at the hit level is going to bring back the least amount of data. So when you pick hit here, we're going to say, give me all the hits, and think of a hit as like, your beacon going off from your website. That's your hit. So you just want information only about that individual web beacon that was sent out where the page name equals home. So when you see that, this is the same exact report up here, just applied our hit level. You see the only is 1 out of 1. The only thing returned back is home, because the only thing returned at the hit level is a hit that has the page name of home. Now to get a little bit more information is the visit one. So here when you pick visit, you're saying, give me all the information about a visit where at least one time there was a hit that had the page of home. So now we've gone a little bit bigger. The hit was, you only want that one call that had page name equals home. Now with visit, you're like, all right, give me everything about that one visit where someone saw the home page. So now you see here, we have 1 of 9,000. So you have the home page. So this home page number is still the same because that's your qualification. You had to see the home page in this visit, and then give me everything else that you saw in this visit. So that's why you see additional. So it's not the same as this, because up here where there's no segment, category 5 was my next highest one. Here you see category 5 is until 4. So we're saying, give me visits where you had to see the home page. So that means like the difference here on this category 5, so category 5 here had 307 versus 171. The difference is there was like 200,000 page views that didn't include the home page in that visit. So that's why they're not down here. Now, visitor is your biggest thing ever. If you want like all the data ever, you can use the visitor. And this one, I'd say be careful when you're using it, because when you say visitor here, you're saying, I don't care when a person saw it, as long as the person at one point in their life saw the home page, include their data. So now here you see like the home page still is the same, but now we're pulling in more. It's like search results. Before, when it was just the visit, was 196. Now we're at 202. Still not quite the same as up here, but visitor will give you so much more. It's like as long as at one point during this time frame the person saw the home page, bring back all the information about it. So this will give you quite a bit of info. So be ready to really say, okay, at the visitor level, give me everything if they just qualified one time for that.
Yeah.
So hopefully that helps kind of explain like the hit, visit, and visitor.
And it gets more in depth too when you start having multiple conditions. So the example that I always used to use for onboarding new associates is if you've got, you want to find out how many orders were placed when people saw the homepage. If you do orders and homepage at a hit level, you're not going to get any results because orders don't happen on the homepage. They happen on the cart page. Whereas orders and home at a visit level, you'll get any orders from the same visit where they saw the homepage, which is probably a bit closer to what you would want in a scenario like that. But orders and home at a visitor level, they don't even have to be in the same visit. And they could, place an order and then come back 2 weeks later and see the homepage, and you would bring in that information. So when you start using those and or conditions, that's when you really want to pay attention to what level you put your segment at.
Yes, this is very high level.
Yeah.
I think like hopefully the documentation can help out a little bit, but yeah. In 6 minutes, that's our definition.
Yeah.
fantastic. I've been looking forward to this. So thank you guys so much.
Awesome.
This has been fun.
Thanks everyone for joining the office hours today. We will get the video posted onto the YouTube channel within the next couple days. And feel free to sign up for our next office hours. The date isn't set yet. It'll be early to mid-March will be our next one. So feel free to sign up and add your questions. While you're here, if you haven't joined the user group, feel free to join the user group. That way you get notified when we set up the new office hours. And thanks, Jason and Sarah, for sharing all of your knowledge today.
Thank you both.
This has been awesome. See you guys.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.